Hey guys, it's Nick. Welcome to another episode of T-Minds 365. If you're part of the Microsoft Partner Program and are getting incentive rebates on a monthly basis, most of you are probably like me where you have a lot of confusion under understanding where this money is actually coming from on a per customer basis, or even throughout the campaigns or programs that you're part of in the partner program. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a Power BI report, which is taking data we're exporting from Partner Center. So you can see this information and can see the rebates on a per customer level. And you can see that over time, and you can also see the actual revenue you might be deriving from a customer with those rebates included as well too. So as always, if you guys want to see more content around Microsoft and the MSP space, be sure to subscribe. Otherwise, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so this is the final product of what we're going to be creating today in Power BI from the export we're taking from Partner Center. But here you can see I have all my customers that I manage there, and I can see all of the products of which rebates are coming from. Up at the top here, I'm viewing all of my incentives coming through. I'm viewing my cost for those particular licenses along with the customer cost, and then I'm deriving a total revenue that I'm receiving, in this particular case, over the 3-year period. Now I can drill in with the slicers to view other information here across the years in which I've exported this data, along with viewing all of the metadata surrounding a single customer, like being able to see all the subscriptions coming through, where the money is coming through per subscription as far as each product, and then I can see the growth potentially over time of the dollar amounts coming for the earnings, and I can toggle between the earning rebate and the co-op. As we all know, co-op funds don't necessarily go straight into our bank account in that particular case. So this is a really helpful tool for me just to understand where the funds are actually coming from to traverse the data. So let's go ahead and pivot into Partner Center where you can see how to export this data. So when you go into the incentive section of Partner Center here, you can see your total earned and total paid. You do need to be an incentives admin to view this information, but I can come here under View Earnings at the top. And at the very top of this screen, I can go ahead and export this data. So you can click on that here. And then within this field, you can decide what types of data you want to export. In my particular case, I like to do just all of the data that I have in the past 36 months. You can do here, and you can filter through various programs if you really wanted to only get certain information. But I just like to have it all so I can traverse it through Power BI. When you go ahead to download that here, you can click on Download Data, and then this will populate after a minute or two here where you can actually download this CSV. In the export that you get here, you can see there's various columns that you can go through. There is quite a bit here that you can do with this, and I'm going to go ahead and just make this into a table. From these sections here, you have, again, various metadata about all of the transactions that went on and what type of earning was produced because of that. You'll see some negative transaction here just because you may have reduced some seat counts potentially or canceled a subscription altogether, which does detract from those earnings as well too. And in here, there's a couple of columns that we'll have to manipulate when we talk about importing them into Power BI. Like here in the product name section, you'll notice that at the very bottom, you might have some blanks, and you want to clean this up basically. So in my environment, I see that all my blanks are actually coming from Azure level spend, and that's how I'm going to clean that up in Power BI. But I recommend playing around with this data a little bit just to see where those blanks are coming from to try to fill in some of the gaps that are coming through with some of these line items as well too, to get the richest results. And additionally, within Power BI, we're going to be able to filter through some of these fields so you can remove that from the actual data manipulation we're doing. So let's go ahead and pivot into Power BI now. So I'm here in Power BI, we're going to go ahead and import the data. Okay, here's where we're going to go ahead and transform the data here. This is where you can clean up the rows and also remove any columns that are really unnecessary. So some of these here might be your participant ID. We're not going to really use that for any of the data manipulation. You can go through each of these rows to kind of determine which ones you don't need. Like the transaction exchange rate for me is pointless, so I don't really want to see that within this particular view. So I'm going to keep going and doing that here, but the one I wanted to showcase as well is just looking at the product name. If I scroll over to that, here, I'm going to go ahead and do a replace values, and I'm going to replace all of my null values with Azure consumption because like I mentioned, I reviewed that information. I saw that those were all coming from Azure spend. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, which will update this. This is also keeping my applied steps if you're familiar with Power BI. If you upload more information like this, it'll continue to do those steps in the future. So this is helpful if you need to clean up some data. But again, I would go through each one of these columns and just eliminate the ones that you don't really need just to keep everything clean. When you're ready, you can go ahead and click on this close and apply. Okay, so once that export is in here, we can go ahead and see the individual fields that we created. So the first thing we're going to do is create a couple of slicers for the data that I like to use here. First of which, obviously, we want to view all of our customer names. So we're going to select that here, and these will all pull up here. And this is how we can traverse by a per customer level just to see their various spend, as well as what products those the spend is actually coming from, and then a timeline of that as well too. So that's a good one to use. Another slicer I want to create here is for the earning type. This is good to use because obviously we have co-op funds that don't exactly get reimbursed to us completely. You have to use those as part of some type of transaction like a marketing expense. And so it's good to filter through to see exactly what you're getting put into your bank account as part of the program versus just what's being put into co-op. Additionally, the last one I want to put in here is the earning date. So I'm going to create one more slicer here. And with this one, I want it to be a list, and I also want to expand this here to include the date hierarchy. And all I'm going to do in my use case is expand it for the year. So I just want to see over the past 3 years and traverse the data that way as well too. Now the next thing that we want to do here is we're going to use a donut chart, and we're going to represent the total spend across products as well too. So we want to use the earnings amount in USD here for this particular one, and we want to do that over the product name. And so this gives us a better view of the product breakdown, and if I switch into a certain customer, I can see where this is coming from as well too. So if I go back up and look at this particular guy here, I'm going to go ahead and change this as well too. We're going to change this to a dollar figure, and it automatically gave certain values there, and I want to bump this down to just 0 for the actual decimal places because I just want it to round up and give me the estimate versus seeing a bunch of decimals for all these products. So this is giving me the spend, and it's telling me the product names associated with it. So this is pretty cool just to break down earnings by the product names as well. The other thing I want to do here is create a line chart. And for this one, what we want to do is go ahead and choose the earnings date again. And so for this one, I just want it to be the month. And over here, I want it to include the transaction amounts or the earnings amounts here. So now I have a clear representation over this as well too over time. And I can drill into my dates here, which will expand and actually show me my earnings amount across the various months in this year. So that's pretty cool to see. And again, I can do the same slicer with the rebates just to see how much money I'm actually getting back each month for a per customer level in this particular case. Or if I wasn't selecting anybody, it's showing me all my customers. So if I go back, we're flatlining this line here because we're only earning $5 a month off the expenses or the spend itself. In this particular case, we have all of these estimates coming up. We can see this customer is more in a growth period with the amount of licensing that we're doing. So the next thing is just the top level lines to represent revenue coming through. So the first one here is just going to be the total incentives. So in here, we're going to go ahead and look for a value, and this is just going to be the total and then earning amount USD, and it's coming straight from the column. It's just doing this dynamically. We're going to change this to a currency value, and again, personal preference here, but I like to have no decimal places, so we're just going to set that up, and that shows the total incentives coming from the rebates for Arkham Asylum in this particular case for this customer. And we'll go ahead and just bump this up to 16 and just expand that here as well. Next thing we'll do is another text box here, and in this text box I want to do the total T-minus 365 cost, which is actually just going to be my cost for all the transactions. So you as a partner, your cost for the licensing going on in the account. Now the exports you get is going to be the distributor's cost. So if you're a CSP1, that's going to be correct. You don't have to do any additional calculations for the transaction column here that we have within this particular section. If I can find it here, transaction amount USD. But if you're CSP2 working with the distributor, you're going to want to calculate your actual margin on these seats. So for that, we're actually going to create a new measure. We're going to call this measure total internal spend. So for this calculation, we're just going to create a simple formula that will go ahead and grab the transaction in USD, and then you're able to put in your margin so that we can calculate actually what we're spending on these licensing. So if you go ahead and use the sum, we're going to use the transaction amount still, USD, and then from there we're going to close that and embrace, and then we're going to do a parentheses 1 minus and then your percentage rate, your margin. So if you're making 16%, you put in 0.16. If you're making 18%, you'd be putting in 0.18. And so you can calculate that here and go ahead and hit enter. And so that should calculate correctly for us here, and then we can just say total internal spend. And again, we want this to be a dollar figure and we want no decimals. So we'll go ahead and save there, and then we'll just bump up the font size again. And then if you want to see the total customer spend, you can do that as well too. And in another measure, and in this particular case, you're just putting in the actual kickback, that's MSRP. So we're exactly going to copy the same formula, but we're going to call this one total customer cost equals, and then we're still going to use the sum of the transaction amount USD, and then we're going to divide that by 0.8. So 0.8 is giving you the MSRP here as far as the calculation goes. So that's what you want to fill out for the customer cost. You'll just hit enter on that one, and then we'll do one more text box here. We'll say total customer cost, and we will add our total customer cost value that we just created. Again, switch this up, change your decimals and save, and then change our font here. So then finally, we want to calculate total revenue, which is going to be these two values subtracted from each other and then adding in the total incentives here as well too. So we'll do one more measure here. We're going to call this total revenue. We'll do an open parentheses here. We're going to do the total customer spend first, and then we're going to subtract that from the total internal spend. And then we're adding the sum of the earnings amount in USD, closing that, hitting enter here. Now we'll add our final text box. We'll add our value. We'll change this up here, and we will reduce our decimal points. Save. Let's bump this up here as well. And so that's everything. This is all I wanted to pull through in this call. This is giving us all of our products. It's giving our spend over time. We can slice through the dates. We can slice through the earnings. We can also slice through customers as well too to see differences. As far as our total revenue goes, like this guy's only making us 18 bucks, for instance, or this guy's making us 12 grand per month here as well too. You'll need to adjust some of these boxes as I'm doing just to make it look a little bit better here. But essentially there's only one more slicer I think I would want to show you guys that you might find helpful. And in this particular case, it's going to allow us to look through the various program types or program names. And that one here, in this particular case, is CSP Indirect Reseller. You also have the potential here to have other programs that you're part of, like the Microsoft Commerce Incentives, which is where everybody's going to go to in 2023. You might also be part of others like campaigns or OSU, service usage, things of that nature that you may want to put in as slicers as well too, to see where certain spend's coming from, if it's coming from various programs within your organization. That's everything I wanted to showcase for you guys in today's video. Hope this was helpful. I hope you guys can create Power BI reports to understand where earnings are coming from on a per customer basis. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those below. Otherwise, like I mentioned earlier, like and subscribe if you guys want to see more content around Microsoft and the MSP space. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.